This is the new norm. Everybody who is an immigrant, or if it's an individual petition like a spouse, everybody is getting fingerprinted. When you go to a visa interview, you've got maybe 15 to 20 seconds to say something affirmative that might change that officer's mind.
Every employer in America is deputized to check basically deputized to assist with immigration enforcement by checking the identity and the right to work for every employee.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers, Charles Kuck and Greg Siskind. Charles H. Kuck is the founding partner of Kuck Baxter LLC in Atlanta, Georgia. Chuck served as the national president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association from 2008 to 2009. He has been an adjunct professor of law for more than 20 years, currently at Emory Law School. He was named one of the top 5 immigration attorneys in the world by Chamber and Partners, again in 2022, and the best immigration lawyer in Georgia by Best Lawyers in 2022 as well. And he was previously named one of the 100 most influential Georgians by Georgia Trend magazine. Greg Siskind is the founding partner of Siskind Susser and has been practicing immigration law since 1990. He is also co-founder of AI software company Visa Law Ventures. He received his bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt University and his law degree from the University of Chicago. Greg is the author of several books and has helped in drafting a number of immigration-related pieces of legislation. He has also testified as an expert in the U.S. House of Representatives Immigration Subcommittee. The webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 60 minutes, and at the end, we will be taking questions from the audience, time permitting. If you have any questions that you'd like to submit to Chuck and Greg, you can do so by clicking the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and submitting them there. Now, without further ado, here are Chuck and Greg to discuss shifting sands, adapting to the latest changes in employment immigration law.
Hey, everybody. Chuck, I should probably say that I haven't authored any legislation that's passed lately, since we have only had like one immigration bill pass probably in the last 2 decades. So,
it's been a long time since you've seen anything substantive.
Although the fun fact, when it was mentioned that I testified in front of Congress, Chuck testified in front of Congress right next to me on that same day. And you got a lot of harder questions than I got.
That I did. My position at the time required them.
All right. So we are talking about changes in employment to immigration law. So as is normal, and Chuck and I have done presentations together, and as is normal, you never know what's going to happen in the world of immigration law that might affect what we're talking about. And Nina knows that we said let's wait until late in the game to get these slides together because so much is changing in immigration. So I worked on them and got them to Nina, I think, yesterday, and of course they're out of date already.
It's been 24 hours. What do you want, Greg? It's just
So let's go to. Well, actually, the one, I don't think we even have a slide about the breaking news, do we? Or is that
let's get to the breaking news towards the end because it'll keep people in a tune here.
All right. So you have to stay in order if you want to figure out breaking news. But Chuck, this has been this Doge effect, even before we know that we thought Doge was just one of those Bitcoin things. They were actually there. This was sort of already having an issue during the transition. With what role Elon was going to play and who had the power in the administration. And of course, it's been the total soap opera that we thought it was going to be. But Doge itself is having an effect, whether Elon's there or not. And by that, we're talking about the Department of Government Efficiency, massive cuts in government spending, and lots of firings and resignation.
Well, perhaps not as massive as was proposed that they cut, but interesting what they did with Doge. Doge actually didn't get into USCIS until pretty late in the game. But it's quite clear that the Trump appointees had a list of things they were going to get rid of.
Yeah, on the employment immigration side, it's less of it. I mean, they had an impact right off the bat on the refugee stuff. So it's not,
Yeah, right, gone.
we're not talking about that today because it's really kind of beyond the topic of employment immigration. But they messed around, and also they had an impact right off the bat with the consulates, and the consulates. So anyway, there has been, and as is the theme here, it's sort of like the announcements made, the actions happen, and then the litigation ensues. It's sometimes in that order. But Chuck, the one that probably broke my heart was the CIS ombudsman when that came out, because I've been, we remember when it was there from the beginning, when it was created, and they've done a lot of wonderful things over the years. And then it's announced that bye bye. This is essentially the watchdog.
What is the ombudsman? The ombudsman was the advocate for the public to deal with the agency created as part of the Homeland Security Act. This is actually a federally mandated agency. This is not something the executive branch did on their own. Congress ordered them. And in fact, there's an annual report that's due every year to Congress from the ombudsman. But I didn't know presidents could just say, Congress, we're not doing this. I just personally thought that was illegal.
Oh, apparently that's what the judge who made the decision in this case thought as well. So the ombudsman's back, but are they back?
Well, but here's the problem, Greg, with the ombudsman. They fired all those people. They left 2 months ago.
Yeah.
You can bring it back all you want, but the people that knew what they were doing are gone.
Yeah.
I happen to know that because one of my former paralegals has worked for the ombudsman for a decade. And she's a senior, like she's number 4 person there, 3 or 4 person there. She's gone. She's not going. I'm not going back. What am I going back for? Oh, I've got a different job now. So
what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the entrepreneur parole program that was created by the Obama administration toward the tail end of that administration, and the Trump administration announced they were killing it, and we went to court. National Venture Capital Association, a bunch of lawyers were involved with it, and won. But did we really win on that?
No, because it never came back.
They never actually adjudicated a single case after.
Well, I did a FOIA on that, just FYI, and I actually got the numbers, and I think it was 267 cases had been adjudicated over the course of the 7 years that it
right,
existed.
but probably none of that happened in the Trump years.
No, very few. Well, again, the ombudsman, ombudsman really took the place of us as lawyers. We used to actually have direct liaison meetings as a national organization with USCIS back in the aughts, and those basically ended near the end of the Biden administration. I mean, of the Bush administration. Obama never really brought them back. Certainly, Biden never had them, and so the ombudsman kind of acted as a way where you could get somebody on the phone to actually go in and fix a problem. It wasn't fast, but it did work, on occasion. That's dead. I mean, that's dead.
It's going to be hard to get a judge to order them to hire somebody too. So I really feel like they just want to kill it by neglect. They have, the next president might be a little bit easier to because they don't have to restore an agency or anything like that. But it's
they just got anticipating.
I'm not anticipating much. Unless there are, and maybe there are a couple of people that are going to stay. We'll see on there. The cuts at USCIS, they were just sort of announced, and also, I guess, with this big, beautiful bill, each agency is basically ordered to come up with cuts on there, but we haven't seen it yet.
What's odd here at USCIS is they are not funded by taxpayer dollars.
Yeah,
they are funded by user fees. That's 96% of their budget is user fees. User fees they use to cover things that aren't charged for, like asylum and a lot of other humanitarian programs, Pro and Place, things like that. So telling USCIS to cut the budget is weird because...
Well, I mean, there are a lot of administrative things that are not actual things, like who maintains the website, who does the...
Again, that is funded by user fees. All of that is funded by user fees. Okay. Congress had given immigration money over the last 4 or 5 years for backlog reduction. Those were one-off monies. They weren't continuing money. So my question is, when they're cutting staff, where are you going to cut? Now, as you know, this is a business immigration group session, right? Are they going to cut adjudicators? Well, we know that the Biden administration had finally staffed up to about 94, 95%.
This is post-COVID.
Necessary bodies that they needed to adjudicate the cases. We know they got close. They didn't get all the way, but they got close. But we also know that a number have now left. And we also know that work from home was ended. And they had an entire service center. What is it? HARP, whatever it made up one. That was literally 100% remote. Everybody was remote. So are they ending HARP? This is what's really unclear at this point about the mandated cuts that have already occurred and the ones that the big, beautiful bill might impose on them. This is going to have an effect at the adjudicatory level.
AI.
Well,
that's how that. I'm somewhere in the conversation. That is those letters keep popping up. It's not good. I'm an AI guy, and this is not. But that's how they're probably figuring it.
So what we're going to see is a slowing. We haven't really seen it yet, really. In fact, weirdly enough, adjustments and naturalization cases are moving, in my opinion, at record pace.
Yeah.
But adjudications are, whether they be waivers, whether they be H-1Bs, that is not moving at record pace. And I think what we're going to see is a real slowdown in adjudication, once again, forcing you to pay the extortion fee. The premium processing fee to get things done. So that means
I will give the optimist view will say that the Biden administration did a really good job in putting the infrastructure in place for electronic filing, and it's a much better program, much better software, and a much better setup than it was, and that will help offset some of the people cuts. That's the optimist.
I will also say many lawyers who are on this may already be seeing a lot more RFEs, a lot more requests for evidence. That is, I think, a result of cuts and clearly internal orders to look for reasons to deny cases. That's clearly happening.
All right, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
So we saw during the transition this war of words between Elon Musk and what's the other guy that ran for president on the Republican side, Vivek, and that's what Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller on the other side on this war over words on H-1Bs and employment immigration. And Elon Musk, as I recall, said, "Over my dead body, are you going to make changes on the H-1B side of things?" Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon said, "We're going to deport Elon Musk." So what do you think? I thought the H-1B lottery went quite well.
Well, Greg, why did that lottery go so well? Who is responsible for a well-running lottery? Could it be people who sued?
It could be a parallel having on this street right now that sued over that issue. Yeah, I mean, maybe the Felicity helped a lot on there, and it got a lot of fraud out of the system, I think, on there. But it went pretty well, and we're in the middle right now of filing for H-1Bs, and I'm not hearing a great outcry from people saying that their H-1Bs are not being adjudicated the way that they're supposed to.
We are seeing a number of RFEs, and if the applicant had any contact with law enforcement ever, even long before they came in this time in the United States, they are getting fingerprinted, and it's freaking people out that they're getting fingerprinted for an H-1B, but that this is the new norm. Everybody who is an immigrant, or if it's an individual petition like a spouse, everybody is getting fingerprinted. They are clearly amassing an AI functioning database. And in some ways, Greg, I would argue that it's not a bad thing to catch fraud. Right. I agree. There is definitely fraud in the age. I don't think there's massive fraud, but I think there's fraud, and fraud is what makes the program weak. So I think we're going to see a real attack on what we would call job shops. Companies, we call them outsourcing companies or insourcing companies in the United States. We're going to see an attack on them. Miller won that fight, by the way. Stephen Miller is the second most powerful person in America today after Donald Trump. And so Musk is on the outs. I do believe we're going to see massive change in the H-1B program here in the next probably year. We're definitely going to see prevailing wage. The prevailing wage WEG is coming back that we've defeated 4 years ago. It's definitely coming back. You're going to see a massive increase in fees. They're going to come with a new fee rule that's going to be very punitive on employers using H-1Bs. I think you may see changes for the Department of Labor on dependent employers, the old remember the old $60,000 wage? That's way out of date. It's way out of date. So I think you're going to see some real changes on this, but we're not really seeing an increased denial. And I think part of that, Greg, is the lessons that lawyers learned the first Trump administration. We learned how to really put the things in place that meet the specialty occupation, and we had enough warning under the Biden administration's rule changes on specialty occupation to be ready to death.
Although, Chuck, I have to just tell you, we had an RFE in the office this week questioning whether a medical doctor is a specialty occupation.
I was going to mention, did you have an RFE this week, Greg? Is that a
so obviously they're taking it very seriously, this whole question of specialty occupations at USCIS, to the point where even doctors are not necessarily high level enough. But all right, so we're going to say anything on L's or O's or any other categories?
Yeah, I mean L's have become very problematic, not just in the Trump administration. They've been problematic for years. What is a manager? What is an executive? These things are really difficult in 2025, but they're better than they are at the consulates, because consulates are even worse on L's. On O's, lot of use of O's in the last several years, and we have seen an increasing number of RFEs on the O's that we found that we have filed in the last 5 months. I think this is because the administration believes that there has been abuse of the O visa program, that people have gotten visas as O's, as extraordinary, that really weren't extraordinary. Perhaps maybe even adopting behind closed doors the Kazarian test, which is for the EB1. We're kind of seeing that sneak into the O1 categories, which of course requires you to be prepared up front to deal with that. Generally, why, besides meeting the set criteria, why your client.
Chuck, Melania met the Kazarian test.
Yeah. Well,
so there you go. How bad could it be?
Yes. How bad could it be?
All right.
There you go.
I put this under musings. I wasn't really sure to classify it, but are these just sort of these weird things that are have come up that the South Africans don't really affect employment immigration, although indirectly. But this gold card. I don't know about you, but I've had a number of clients ask me about it, and it's like, it's not real on there, but they sort of are acting like it's real. But why don't you? So it's basically $5 million.
5 million smackaroos.
That's pretty much it, right? There's like no rules for this program.
That's
no
it.
Creation, attachment.
And you can sign up for it today. It's live. You can sign up for the Trump School. And I do believe that
I would bet there's somebody thinking about, how can we accept deposits?
I know. Well,
what's bank account can I put that
in? Trump's personal bank account. And they have a picture of the card, and it's gold, right? It's going to be this gold card. But at the same time, there is literally no statutory basis for this whatsoever.
There is an attempt by a few in Congress to try and slip it into legislation.
Oh no,
I'm guessing it's somewhere in the big beautiful bill, although
it's not. It's not in the big beautiful bill.
Okay.
It's not in the big beautiful bill.
This gold card is I don't want to call it a scam, but it's
a scam. It's 100% a scam.
If anybody asks you about the gold card, if you're an immigration lawyer watching this, or you're a corporate lawyer and you're dealing with somebody, it is a musing. It is not real. Let me
say one more thing on the gold card. They are taking signups. What I don't know is what they're doing with that information. And they keep saying like 50,000 people. They don't have 50,000 people sign up for
50,000 people probably with that kind of money.
No, $5 million. I mean, they think they're going to reduce the national debt. I mean, why would you if you have $5 million, why would you subject yourselves to worldwide taxation.
Yeah.
Why would you do for the U.S.
There's only one group of people that I would think would be interested in it, and I've met two of them, who are people that are inadmissible to the United States for some, and in both cases, it's people that came as children and made spectacular money, even though they've been illegal most of their lives.
I actually have one of those too, and
Yeah, very sound. Those are the people that could benefit from it. And it would be sort of a get out of deportation.
Yeah, but how would you get around the inadmissibility grounds? That's
Well, but that's why you have to do it legislatively. You make that something that's waivable in this particular category if you have that kind of money.
I did hear a musing that they would admit these folks under the EB-1A extraordinary ability catalog. Their extraordinary ability being that they're rich.
Okay.
I mean, that's what Trump thinks extraordinary is, so why not? There you go. The gold card.
The extraordinary ability in business.
Get on today from AAA.
Yeah, the Afrikaners, I think we put that on there strictly as amusing, but it became, it's a little out of date. They're not using anymore. They have been admitted as refugees to the U.S. and they have work authorization, so it has an impact for employers on there. But there's like 50 of them. I don't know if they've admitted any others.
I haven't seen any more come. This is something that I'm sure Elon Musk put in Trump's ear to let South African Afrikaners in.
Yeah,
I don't see there's going to be thousands of Afrikaners coming on this. But honestly, it makes a mockery of the refugee program that we currently have. So
agree. All right. So we'll move on from that. All right. So this is an issue that Chuck and I have spent a lot of the spring working on. And this was an issue that has potentially a big impact on employment immigration. But basically, it's still not really largely understood by the public, who saw it at the, early on in the Trump administration. They went after some of the Gaza protesters and managed to revoke their CVIS and try and remove them from the U.S. But shortly after that, almost immediately after that initial group of a handful of people, all of a sudden, a lot of other people who are apolitical and have no interest in the Gaza issue got revocation notices that their SIVA stands for the Student Exchange Visitor Information System. It's run by ICE. They set this up after 9/11, and it was designed to basically track students in the U.S. And you need to be in that system and in a valid status in order to be able to maintain your student status, to be able to get employment authorization through optional practical training, et cetera, et cetera. And what we saw happening was, well, I don't know the exact order because it seems like it's always been a little bit murky, but students were losing their visas and then their CVIS was being revoked or vice versa, was happening. And excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. And then, sorry. And then so we had that issue going on for, I guess, 6,000, Chuck, was the number that it happened to.
It was never clear. They've never disclosed exactly how many. I think at one point they said 3,500, but statistically it should have been between 4,000 to 6,000 that were, because that accounts for about 0.5% of students having had an encounter at some point in their life with law enforcement.
Yeah. And then the students, fairly sophisticated bunch, they all started suing over this issue for Administrative Procedure Act violations, other violations. And maybe there were like, what, Chuck, 100 suits, do you think? I don't know how many of them actually.
Oh, no, there was over 250 lawsuits.
250 lawsuits.
Over 200 awards.
How many people lost?
There was nobody technically lost the lawsuit. There was one loss of a TRO, but they ended up getting a preliminary injunction. So there was no losses. They lost every single case.
Right. We had the one that was the biggest one with about 350. Chuck filed it initially in Atlanta with mostly, I guess, Georgia students, or mostly Georgia.
No, it was nationwide. We had 33 Georgia students, and then
okay. But that's I guess you heard about it initially from Georgia students. Is that what you're
right? Yeah, I got calls from the DSOs. These are the school officers in charge of the program for students, and they were freaking out. Greg, I would note that not every student was sophisticated enough to sue. Many were terrified and left.
Yeah.
I mean, there was hundreds that were
Sad
told by
because
the
they're really they've lost out on their chances for a while, at least for and they might have a shot, and we'll talk about that in just a
Yeah,
second.
we'll talk about that in a second.
But we had 350 by the time the onboarding was finished in the second round, sort of with the judge. But that suit is it safe to say it's settled now, or is
I'm literally waiting for the order from the federal court judge so we can file the stipulation.
what were some of the things that DHS agreed to?
They agreed, of course, to reinstate the students to the date in which they were terminated as if they had never been terminated. So, and they will be receiving a letter from ICE that says you were never out of status, you never violated your status. They agreed to not put any of them in removal proceedings. They agreed to update the system as best they could technologically to reflect this as well. A couple of things that ICE could not do, of course, was give them money. Someone come pay me for my inconvenience. Honestly, some of our clients lost jobs. They lost their jobs on this, but they were most of them that were graduating were more concerned about OPT and H-1Bs that have been filed for them. So they all have letters that says they're perfectly fine. The other thing we had put in this suit that we're actually dismissing and refiling, Greg, was that when ICE went to the Department of State and said, hey, these guys all have hits on NCIC, state said, you should revoke SEVIS. We're going to cancel those visas that are still valid, revoke them. And that has led to an entire crazy scenario about and literal changes by Department of State to the FAM, the Foreign Affairs Manual, to cover themselves for what they had done to these students, because there was nothing in the FAM that allowed them to revoke or prudentially revoke for just a regular stop by the police, or even individuals that had prior arrests that had left, gotten a visa through disclosure, and come back in. So hundreds of our students got letters from the emails that said, hey, we're revoking your visa. It turns out those were now prudential revocations, so they weren't effective immediately. So these students could not be put into deportation proceedings. That's actually clear from the law. But Greg, the sad thing we're seeing is that some of those folks who had visa had left. So they went in to get a new visa and they're denied. Yeah. They were denied on intending immigrant grounds.
So it has nothing to do with the reason why they were dismissed in the first place.
And these were kids who were coming back for graduation. They were coming back for OPT. They were coming back for their last year of their PhD. Denied. I've only seen 2 out of at least 30 so far that have had their visas reissued. So we are going to be taking, once this case is dismissed, we're going to be filing a new lawsuit in Washington, D.C. only for those whose visas were revoked and are still in the United States or who haven't gone to the consulate yet, to see if we can't get those restored, because Department of State clearly acted illegally in doing this as well. But suing the Department of State is very different from suing ICE.
All right. We actually have a question related to this conversation from an attendee. And the question is, I'm doing my master's in applied mathematics, graduating this December. What's our suggestion in this situation? Should they use OPT and search for a job with H-1B sponsorship, or go on for the PhD? I mean, you could make the case probably for either. I mean, just don't go to Harvard for the PhD, but I shouldn't say that. That's another development, by the way. Harvard's and the student front on there is that Harvard.
Remind me, I want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess that's first of all, I think it's sort of like there's not a precise answer to that. I mean, that's always been a good strategy for some people if they feel that their chances will be better later on, and just continue on their education, go for the highest level available. That being said, right now, the OPTs should be, even if there was a CVIS termination, the OPT should still be going fine, probably for most people. We haven't heard about anybody who's had that issue yet.
No, and that's one of your promises of the lawsuit.
Yeah, and the H-1Bs, I mean, you can make an argument that this, at least from the standpoint of the numbers have really come down on H-1B applications, that it's somewhat of a better time right now than it was previously. And this person has a master's, I think they said. So it's I think they said that.
They got about a 50% chance of getting.
Yeah, so their chances are a little bit better on their a PhD doesn't improve your chances in the H-1B lottery because it's for anybody with an advanced degree. So if you have a master's already, your odds are going to be the same at that point. On the other hand, PhDs tend to have fewer issues when it comes to like arguments about whether they qualify for a specialty occupation, those kind of things. I'd say this is a good conversation to have with a lawyer who knows your background, and you can kind of get into the issues with them. But it is a good illustration of sort of the conversations that people have with their lawyers over what's the best strategy to go. Chuck, we had some resolution on this next bullet point on the FMNJ vetting mess.
Is there resolution on that, Greg? That's really the question. Is there real resolution? There, at least, Trump suspended FMJ visa processing, Rubio suspended that. They're back doing the appointments again, setting appointments again, but it looks, it's a very messy situation. One, there is a directive from Marco Rubio to not interview, or to interview last of all people being interviewed, students attending schools in the United States or going to schools where more than 15% of the student body are foreign students. They were told not to interview them or just delay it. That's going to impact schools like Harvard. You may have heard, by the way, that Harvard is in the process of settlement talks with the government, mostly because Harvard's going to win that lawsuit. But the reality is Harvard's going to win that battle, but they're going to lose the war. They are going to see a reduced number of students by force because the Biden and Trump administration is going to not interview them. Now, that said, that's quite illegal to do that. There is no valid lawful basis to not interview a student just because they're going to a school with more than 15% of a foreign student body. But that's what we're seeing. And we're also seeing and we saw this the first time he was president, Greg, a heightened standard for the intent to return home.
Yeah.
This, I intend to return home. Under Obama, where we saw record numbers of students, under Biden, all you had to basically say was, I intend to come back home. But under Trump, you have to go beyond that. And we're seeing a lot of denials because kids are terribly unprepared for that question. When you go to a visa interview, you've got maybe 15 to 20 seconds to say something affirmative that might change that officer's mind. And if you're not prepared with that talk, you have a really strong sense of getting denied. I don't know what we don't have the stats yet on denials, but I suspect that student visa denial rates are going to skyrocket, and we will see somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% fewer. We're talking 400,000 fewer students in the United States come the fall.
Yeah, a big boost to a lot of countries who have been putting a lot of effort into trying to compete for those students.
It's great for Germany and Australia and Canada. Yeah.
I did want to mention something about J visas because I do a lot of work for
a lot of those J's. What do you see?
And the timing for this couldn't have been more disastrous, particularly for rural Americans, a lot of red state voters, because a lot of people don't realize that about a quarter of all the doctors that train in the United States in residency programs, and that's sort of our doctor supply comes through that, are on J visas. They come in every year and they're on a what's called a physician graduate year. Physician graduate year starts July 1st. What are they doing during the month of June? They're applying for their visas. And they match in their programs in late March. They then have to go through a lot of administrative stuff at the residency programs. And then the visa applications start coming in late May, early July, right when this FMJ appointment freeze happened while they were setting up this new fraud, social media AI thing that nobody really understands exactly what they were doing. But what it means is that since they only just started resuming visa processing for these people a couple of days ago, and I think they have, these doctors aren't going, 25% of all the doctors in residency programs, and they're the ones that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting at hospitals all around the country, are probably going to get here late. And that, if you think about every teaching hospital in America is going to be short-staffed for the month of July, what does that actually mean for, sort of broadly speaking, for healthcare delivery in this country? And it's serious.
People will die.
Yeah.
People will die.
Yep. All right. Let's on that happy note, let's keep moving along.
Oh, well, one last thing on that. Don't forget, students have to now have their social media public. And people are being denied because on their social media they were pro-Palestinian, or apparently because they post photos of a bald Vice President Vance.
There you go. Well, that's good to know that that's what it's come to. All right, worksite enforcement. So this is the Ronald Reagan legacy on immigration is complicated, but one of the things that we've had in this country for, I guess next year we'll have the 50th anniversary of the 86 Act on there, but he created this program with Congress where every employer in America is deputized to basically deputized to assist with immigration enforcement by checking the identity and the right to work for every employee of that company. And most people watching this call have probably filled out an I-9 form in their life. Although interestingly, in my first job as a lawyer, I never filled out an I-9 form for a large law firm. So and that was after the requirements went into effect. So, but anyway, just getting back on track. I-9 audits are one of the key ways that Immigration and Customs Enforcement basically ensures that employers are following the rules regarding this deputy role that they have to assist with immigration enforcement. And we apparently are seeing a lot of I-9 audits being issued by ICE right now. I don't think we've seen data yet, but we're certainly anecdotally hearing a lot of reports. And I want to know if you've been having conversations with your clients yet about this, about maybe the benefits of doing a preventative audit, which people have not done over the years historically, because it's a lot of work to do that. But are more people asking you about maybe we should look at our I-9s before ICE comes and asks us for them? Or are they not scared enough yet?
It's not scared enough yet. But I think a lot of employers, at least larger employers, have switched over to electronic I-9s. So they're generally good. It's the small employers that have 5, 10, 20, 30 folks that are still using pieces of paper to fill these things out. They're the ones most at risk here. And they're the ones that are more likely to be audited. The last Trump administration, they ran their audit program based on tips. There's an 800 number you can call to report an illegal worker, and basically ICE will almost automatically send out a worksite inspection notice and deliver that to the employer. Most people forget that on March 15th, 2020, ICE delivered 5,000 notices of inspection. And 7 days later, the government shut down, and that was the end of those notices of inspection. I'm still doing 5 years later, those cases, because they hadn't resolved them yet. That was a drop in the bucket to what I suspect will be hundreds of thousands of notices of inspection over the course of the Trump administration. So as a lawyer, you should be reaching out to your corporate clients and saying, do you have I-9s? Hopefully they say yes. They don't say, what's an I-9? And say, are they on paper? Yes. We're going to need to review those. We're going to need to make sure that they're up to date, that they're correct, that they're filled out correctly. Although otherwise we'll have to get those corrected, of course, using a red pen and initialing and dating. Don't just make changes to the forms, and reflecting the date that you make any changes.
And at least do a sampling audit. If you can't do the whole thing because it's too much, you should at least be able to identify if there are.
I know, Greg. I did an audit in 2019 of a company that had 2,000 paper I-9s, and I looked at every single one of those I-9s.
Yeah,
and that was the worst week of my life, I believe. There are 40.
I write a book on I-9s. I actually like to sort of go through the analysis part of it. But it is for the companies that are doing them preventatively, it's, it's disruptive. It's a pain.
Long.
You should do it every once in a while. It wouldn't be as necessary if companies had better policies regarding training people internally to do them and to have good systems in place. And we recommend switching to an electronic system, but that doesn't end liability for the previous years that you were.
And Greg, that's one of the important points here is you make sure your employer, if they have any I-9s for terminated employees, you teach them the 1 and 3 rule, that you get rid of those I-9s for terminated employees 3 years from date of hire or year for termination, whichever is longer. Get them out of here because you're liable. If you got an I-9 from some dude from 10 years ago, you are still liable for that, even though you could have thrown it away.
Yeah. So that's and that's what you find out in an audit. We did have a question on this topic from Griselda Rodriguez, who asked about whether isn't ICE required to give a 3-day notice to do. Yes, ICE has to give 72 hours notice before you have to produce the I-9s. That is not the case, by the way, if they're coming in and doing some inspections on E-Verify, because E-Verify is separately done by an E-Verify agreement that you have. So that they don't have to give you 72 hours that they're coming in and looking through your E-Verify documentation and all that. So that's a little bit different than an I-9 audit. But a lot of people have to use E-Verify in their states. And so just keep in mind that the 72-hour period is different for I-9s than it is for E-Verify.
Which is why you should never use E-Verify if you don't have to by state law.
Right.
But Greg, this gets to the next set, which is kind of the FDNS visits and the worksite raids.
Yeah.
These are two different things. And we saw this in DC in the restaurants a couple weeks ago when they raided the restaurants. Those were not raids. They didn't have any warrants. So a raid is ICE has a warrant from a federal judge, not one of their crappy administrative warrants, which are worth the paper they're printed on. It's to be signed by a federal judge. You simply say, okay, well, come on in. And you'll know they have a warrant like that because they'll have 40 agents on a bus outside. If they just show up and say, let me show your kitchen. As an employee, you tell your clients, you ask, do you have a warrant, a judicial warrant? If not, please leave the premises. This goes to the whole issue of what's public in your place of work. So we have a lobby, but our lobby is behind a glass door. If you come in and they wanted to see papers, I would ask them to leave. It's not public space, our space. If you got a restaurant, that public area is kind of a public area, but if they don't have a warrant, you can still ask them to leave. And certainly you don't have to let them into your kitchen to look for people. The FDNS visit's a little bit different. FDNS are the fraud detection national security people that work for USCIS. Now, Greg, they do a lot of these by phone, these FDNS visits, and these are to check on your H's and your L's sometimes. And there's a lot of bad stuff that comes out of not understanding what an FDNS audit is. So if your client has H-1B employees, you should be giving them information about how their receptionist should handle somebody who identifies themselves with the initials FDNS, so that you have a set person to deal with that, you know how to deal with that, and you handle it correctly. Otherwise, you could end up with revoked H-1Bs.
All right. Do we want to deal with this one, or do we want to keep moving? Because it's sort of...
I think a lot of these have employment components that are really, really important to understand. So the DACA, of course, is still valid. And in fact, DACA is there's about to be a whole new slew of DACA recipients.
That's a good news story.
It's a great news story if the Trump administration doesn't try to revoke the DACA program,
right?
Which they may try to do, especially with
they're not.
Miller hates the DACA program. Now, my take on that, the reason they're not going to is they know that would push Congress over the edge, that you would get legislation on immigration that
200,000 healthcare workers in DACA.
Oh, yeah. So DACA's still good unless you live in Texas. Starting soon, whenever Judge Hannon decides to make a final decision on the case, if you're in Texas, DACA is not recognized as an employment authorization. You live in Texas, you cannot extend your DACA. You cannot get an advanced parole if you're in Texas. So if you got DACA and you're in Texas, it's time to move. Now,
Yeah.
Go anywhere you want, but honestly, get the heck out of Texas. Humanitarian parole. This is
I
speaks
mean, it's
to why-
unbelievable that people have to actually like uproot themselves and move because the courts, because of the court. All right.
This
Well,
is why nationwide injunctions are important, by the way.
that's right. We're going to
So
get to that.
humanitarian parole goes to humanitarian parole goes to the CHVN, the Cuban, Haitian, Venezuelan, Nicaragua program, Ukrainian folks that were allowed in. So the CHVN folks, all of their work permits have been canceled. And if the employer that's employing them was on E-Verify, if they've received an email that said, check this, unless they've got something else, they're no longer authorized to work. And you are liable, employer, if they keep working for you. The Uniting for Ukraine program is coming to an end. I do not suspect that Trump will extend that either. So we got another 100, 200.
That's how he feels about Zelensky in that given week. But we will soon know.
Who knows?
That's a fairly popular program with Congress too. We'll see.
We've got TPS, where you've got several 100,000 people losing their work authorization from the Venezuela program, the Honduras program, the Cameroonian program, the Syria, all these programs Trump is ending. But oddly enough, the only one he is not ending, Greg, this is curious, El Salvador. We're not seeing an end to the El Salvador TPS program. I wonder why.
Yeah.
Now, refugees, of course, there aren't any anymore. There will be no more refugees in America.
Except for South Africans.
Well, that's true. The 50 South Africans, I don't know. Are they going to work on a farm somewhere? A little unclear where they're going to be working. And then, of course, asylum still continues, but they're looking for ways. The Trump administration is exploring ways to end the asylum program in America. Yes, you heard it here first. They're looking for ways to make it impossible to get asylum. And that comes with, of course, Supreme Court changes, etc.
All right. Let's keep moving so we can save time for the headline or story.
Yeah.
This one, I know a lot of people are getting these questions about travel, not travel, and we're going to get to travel bans in a minute, but just sort of as a general rule about people that are being hassled when traveling. Is it just anecdotes or is there?
No, I would, keep in mind, if it bleeds, it leads. So the stories you hear in the press are the ones getting caught. They're not emblematic percentage-wise. And I will tell you, we have long harassed people coming into the United States. We have a long history of doing that. It's not just Trump, but they're picking on certain types of people these days. Just so that you know, when a plane takes off and is going to America, that passenger manifest is given the CBP. They run that through an AI to look at every social media, a database they have to see who they want to talk to when they get off the plane. They know where you're getting off. They know the seat you're sitting in. They know the window you're coming up to. It's not random when you walk up. So if you've got a social media account that makes fun of Vance and is massive support for Palestinian protests and attacks Trump, you could very well be spoken to very strictly by an officer to try to get you to admit other things. They, of course, look for fraud. If you've got pending applications, they look for fraud in those applications. But we're talking about less than 0.1% of travelers. Millions of people a month are coming in without a problem.
Right. And the order of risk goes higher. The highest is non-immigrant visa holders, then green card holders. Citizens are less. But I did want to mention, because I know you've gotten calls from U.S. citizens like we have.
Oh yeah. People crying in my office.
Traveling. And it's like, you cannot be denied entry to the United States if you have a U.S. passport. They can hassle you, they can bully you and all that, but at the end of the day, they have to let you in.
They can take your phone, they can take your computer, they'll give back to you.
Right.
They do not have to give your passwords. But just sit. What I recommend people, after you say why, where you were, you don't have to answer any more questions.
Right. But they have the right. It's important to mention that, they have the right to take a phone away from a citizen or a permanent resident or a non-immigrant visa holder. Eventually they do have to return it, I guess, but they
do after 30, 60 days, they give it back.
Right. They can hold on to it. So that is something, and you don't have Fourth Amendment protections the same way when you're entering the country as you do when you're in the country. So keep that in mind. Permanent residents, it seems like the main risks are people that had issues that might make them inadmissible. like criminal issues and things like that, which never became an issue, weren't an issue before. But am I right?
Two risks. One is a crime after you got your green card, you were arrested for something. But also, they are looking at pre-green card crimes to make sure they were properly waived. So again, if you've got a criminal history as a permanent resident, you shouldn't be traveling to talk to an immigration lawyer who understands criminal immigration issues going forward. But if you're a non-immigrant visa holder, you are subject to the highest level of scrutiny. You might want to consider, one, not traveling with your device, right? You can always mail it to America. Or take your freaking SIM card out and just mail yourself. I don't have a SIM card. Travel with a dummy phone. You also understand.
Not every phone has to be a smartphone.
No, you can travel with a flip phone. You're good fine. I travel with a flip phone and I travel internationally. And I just take a SIM card with me, then it's got all my stuff on it, and I just upload it to a phone there.
What about permanent residents who just are politically vocal?
You got to be careful. We know that they are looking for reasons. You have to understand, every past administration was embarrassed. They could be embarrassed in the press by doing something like arresting somebody for being vocal about Palestinians. You cannot embarrass the Trump administration. You can't embarrass them enough to get them to change their mind. So just delete it. Just delete it.
Let's move, because I want to talk about I want to talk about Supreme Court. So let's there's a lot on the slide, but just quickly, we have 2 travel bans in place right now that are somewhat different, and a big one that might be coming. Is that right? Or we think it's going to be?
That is absolutely correct. We've got the 12 fully banned countries, which is tragic. I mean, I represent a lot. Iran is one of the top 10 immigration countries to the United States. You can imagine why. And basically, I have folks that literally waiting for their final decision at the consulate for 2 years, and now they can't come in until Trump is gone. You've got the partial ban.
The 12 is the more severe one. That's all non-immigrant visas and immigrant visas. They're banned from the countries that are on the screen right now. And then we have the 7 partial, where it's all the immigrant visas, and then the B, F, M, and J categories for non-immigrant visas.
Visitors, students, residents, things like that. So
right. All right. So in terms of,
and don't forget, but we do have the World Cup and the Olympics coming to the United States. So we did exclude athletes.
Right. So they're off the hook. World Cup and Olympics, those athletes. We also have this thing for waivers for national interest in media relatives, which is covered.
Yeah. The national interest waiver is very different from last time, and basically excludes everybody. It's going to be really, really hard to get a national interest waiver. Immediate relatives is the only waiver that's left.
Right. And that doesn't include K1s, which
doesn't include.
So that's something that that's on our radar as far as
that's too bad. That would have been a great lawsuit.
Yeah. Might still be. Okay. All right. Finally, we don't have a slide for it because it just happened like 2 hours ago on there, but we had a decision from the Supreme Court today on birthright citizenship. Well, I shouldn't say it's not technically on birthright citizenship. It's on the procedure that led to, related to the executive order regarding whether the Supreme Court, whether national injunctions are basically over. I mean, it certainly sounds like that in a lot of cases from this decision. They expressly did not say that the birthright citizenship order was unconstitutional or illegal. It's just that this national injunction is what's been banned. And the dissents were pretty harsh on there, talking about basically like, we know, there's no longer any rule of law in America. Any president can basically issue an executive order on anything as unconstitutional as they want, and basically say, too bad, you have to sue me to get out of this on here, which is pretty shocking.
You have to sue me individually for you individually to get out of this. Greg, this is not just an anti-constitutional executive order. There's a federal law, 8 U.S.C. 1401, that says anyone born in the United States is a United States citizen. I mean, there's federal law on this. So the president issued an executive order contrary to federal law. If that's the new standard, sit back and relax, folks, because we've got a serious problem in America.
The consequences of today's decision, I don't think can be understated. this is going to basically cause a meltdown in America's federal courts because we're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of lawsuits that are going to have to be filed, not frivolous suits. I mean, this is like the real stuff. People are talking about like their citizenship's on the line if they don't file a lawsuit now. And this is going to tie up every court in the country. And most of the judges seem like they're pretty much like going to rule against the administration. But the Department of Justice is just not, there is no way they have the capacity to handle what they're about. That's just not coming to the DOJ.
I found out this week that our Atlanta office of the Department of Justice, the assistant U.S. attorneys, have 4 lawyers in their civil division. 4.
Yeah.
They need 20. They're working literally at about 15% capacity.
Yeah, I mean, they fired a bunch of people. A lot of people quit. And DOJ is meaning that they're not replacing them. And they are, I mean, maybe this is what they want on theirs, to just basically break the courts, but it's
break the system. Now, let me add this. I have heard people say, well, just file class action. Yeah, that's the kicker in immigration. The Aleman case from a couple of years ago, Justice Alito ruled that 8 U.S.C. 1252 bars class action in most immigration-related suits. So you cannot file a class action in most immigration-related suits. And if you've never done a class action, don't be so flippant about just file a class action. Class actions are really hard to get. They're virtually impossible to get nationwide. Virtually impossible to get nationwide. And they take 6 to 12 months in a good case to get sustained. Now, Greg and I have been working on one for Ukrainians. How long has that taken, Greg?
We filed in August 2022.
Yeah. So it's been 3 years we were working on that to get a class certification done. And again,
by the way,
not the answer here.
In the Boston case on the CHNV and the Ukrainian parole, class did get certified and the Supreme Court still invalidated a national injunction.
Yep.
So even if you get the class certified, the Supreme Court seems to have a problem with the national injunction.
So now so it's going to be really interesting to move forward. But Greg, I think we're preparing to file the latest numbers I looked at, thanks to our friends at the Anti-Immigrant Think Tank, that there are about 350,000 births a year to undocumented women and about 40,000 births to non-immigrant visa holders. Yes, you heard me say it. Non-immigrant visa holders, their children also are not U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
So let's say 400,000 people a year. So 400,000 cases a year. This should be actually entitled, instead of the birthright citizenship case, we should call this the immigration lawyer's full employment case, is what this should be.
It's part of our, yeah. I mean, and you know, kind of the irony is we kind of get attacked a lot of, you know, for frivolous lawsuits and all that. I don't know any immigration lawyer who's actually asking for this on here. Or all like basically said loud and clear, it's like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. They're about to get, you know, every immigration lawyer in the country is now going to be filing these suits. And it's completely unnecessary. And it's not the way we want to earn our living. We'd rather doing it actually helping people with things that are good, like getting, you know, but this is not what any of us signed up for. But it is the reality, I think, right now. And we'll see. I have a feeling this is not going to be like, you know, but like, you know, 50 years, but and they're going to turn it. I have a feeling probably within the next 10 years, they're going to be revisiting this, probably in response to a Democrat that they don't like what they're doing, but or whoever, but it is. And that was the other part of it, is like, be careful what you wish for, administration, because there were some programs that national injunctions stopped. The DAPA program, they stopped, you know, it's being used against DACA. It's been used in a lot of cases for programs that Democratic presidents have tried to get through, and now it's sort of all fair game again.
Well, actually, there's a CVIS national injunction out of California that will be obviously ended as of today. So this is obviously changes the landscape, it changes how things are litigated. And for the Trump administration, it's a great thing, right? They can pass, especially for immigration issues, they can keep issuing crazy executive orders and crazy regulations and crazy policies. For example, the new policy that was just issued just yesterday on fines, an interim final rule published today on fines fining people that are overstaying their visas, streamlining the fine process, basically eliminating due process protections, now will have to be dealt with on a literal case-by-case basis.
Yeah. So if any lawyers out there who have experience with federal litigation are feeling like they need a change of pace, the immigration space is going to have a lot of opportunity for a while, but and presumably a lot of other areas as well, because these class actions and these mass actions seeking national injunctions are going to be harder to get. So it's going to be a lot of individual cases.
Wow, that's a fast hour there, Greg. That was quite
I don't know. So Nina, you can let us know if we didn't. I'm just showing on the screen what we didn't show previously, but I did want to mention one last thing. And then, so Chuck, in the good news category, this last bullet point, we're past it. So the Biden administration was very diligent in getting some really good regulations done late in the game, and they were finalized and effective for H-1Bs, H-2As, H-2Bs. The deference rule is now forever on there because they got them done in time. Congress has this thing called the Congressional Review Act, where they have 180 days, I believe, or 60 legislative. I forget what the rule is, but basically the clock ran about a month ago, and the only way to get rid of these rules now is by new rulemaking, and it's going to be really hard to do it. So I'll leave on something positive, at least from our perspective. I mean, obviously Chuck and I have a view of the world, which might not be everybody's, but that is, those rules are here to stay.
It is, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So that's that final end to our discussion.
And if you're Romanian, no more visa waiver program for you. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, Tina, did we do our job?
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
We can now go ahead and dive into those questions. If you do have other questions, folks, feel free to submit them by clicking the Q&A button in the control panel.
I thought you were smiling because one of our questions is from I don't know if this is Ed Rubin, Edwin Rubin.
Is that the Ed Rubin?
I don't
The
know.
Ed Rubin.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Is asking a question that's a good question, which is on DACA. Why are these? What changed with DACA as far as that goes? And I guess that the basically DACA has been on freeze for the same beneficiaries since the courts started doing their thing 6 years ago.
2021, when they froze the Biden administration regulations,
Right.
which to try to unfreeze the prior regulations.
So DACA had a bunch of people that could have qualified if the program was continuing, but didn't because they weren't old enough yet to qualify, and they didn't have the high school degree.
Or they just didn't file.
But they just didn't file. That group of people, if they still meet the program rules, can apply now, or as soon as the judge issues the order.
Right. Well, you can apply now. They'll take your money, but I wouldn't recommend it. There's also 90,000 unadjudicated DACA applications that the Biden administration sat on before the case was.
Or in theory, those can all be improved now.
Yeah, that could be immediately, and 40 congressmen and senators have written a letter to USS asking why they haven't done anything, and it's because Judge Hannon needs to rule. There's no final order until Hannon rules and issues.
That's what the Fifth Circuit said.
So we should get there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 to 300,000 additional young men and women that are now qualified for DACA that came in before June 15, 2007, that were here on June 15, 2012. Right. That had graduated from high school or are enrolled in classes, et cetera, et cetera.
So certainly something to be watching and probably identifying if you're, a lawyer that works on this, identifying those people who might be re-eligible now to do that. That's something that probably is a good thing to do now while we're waiting on that final paperwork. All right. So there was a question as well from somebody anonymous who said, which executive orders have been most durable in shaping delays, issues with H-1B and other employment visas? So we don't have, like last time we had that Buy American, Hire American business. That's not around this time. So from the executive order perspective, I think probably the thing that's messing it with the most are probably the travel bans. But
Correct.
really, we haven't seen that much at the executive order level that's affecting the H-1B and the other employment-based non-immigrant visas.
Here's my take, Craig. The people that are now running the USCIS and people that were there during the last 100 years, they know what Stephen Miller wants. They don't need administrative action. They don't need an order. They know what needs to be done.
That's the way it usually works with organized crime, but I'm not saying.
Well, I'm just saying they know what needs to be done. There's another great question from Griselda about facial recognition. Should you disable facial recognition? Of course you should. Otherwise, immigration somebody takes your phone, holds it up to your face, and your phone opens. So of course you should disable that. You should disable it anyway.
That is one of the things that I've seen recommended. I think the Electronic Frontier Foundation has a good document.
They do, as the
ACLU
ACLU
does as well if you're an ALA member and you're watching this. But you should educate yourself about some of those things. For lawyers that are watching this, I would certainly say remember to assert client privilege if you have information on your devices that are protected, and there's a different set of procedures that CBP has to go through in order to be able to access that data. So once you assert it, and you suddenly become a pain in the neck for CBP because they have to go through that whole process.
Right.
They may decide to do it, but you certainly have an ethical obligation as a lawyer to assert that and not just hand over your client data. So keep that in. What else do we have?
We have you heard of an NTA being issued when an H-1B is revoked? Yes, I have seen that. Even though it's within the 60 days, that's a clear violation of USCIS policy.
Yeah.
What I would tell a client in that situation is to file a change of status immediately to visitor or student, or find out the rate from the employer, and assert in the change of status that the NTA was improvidently issued under regulation because you weren't deportable at that point. And of course, we haven't seen it play out yet, but that's how I would approach that.
Okay. Nina, you'll tell us when whether we can keep going or not. Can we keep going?
Yes, absolutely. Take as much time as you need.
All right.
What are the employer's obligations to communicate political or policy lists to sponsored workers? I don't think there's any employer obligation. I mean, tell your employees to wake up and smell the roses. I think
I have seen employers, do interesting things like pay for a legal hotline so that they don't have to talk to the employer about it, but they can access a lawyer. And when the employer gets billed, they're not being billed for, it's not specifying in the bill who they talked, who the lawyer talked. Get on the honor system about that. But that there are things that employers can do if they want to, but they're not always, that's not always, they're not obligated to do it. But a lot of employers want to be helpful in that regard. So that is something that you could look at doing, is giving.
One of the questions: how should offer letters be adjusted, or training programs? I mean, obviously, it's up to the employer. This, by the way, is going to chase some employers away from sponsorship. And there's a lot of employers in America that won't hire anybody on a visa. They just won't do it for these kind of reasons.
Well, unemployment's going to go through the roof because we're going into a recession, right? So it's not going to matter.
They don't have to do it. So really, it's up to the employer about how cognizant they want to be, how helpful they want to be. I mean, a lot of them, there's a number of employers that depend on foreign workers working on visas. And depend on bringing in the best and the brightest to their job. What they do is, they hire lawyers for their folks and say, call the lawyer with any questions you have. But I think most employees that are coming to work on H-1Bs or Ls, they're fully cognizant. Everybody's on social media. Everybody knows the crazy things that are going on. And a lot of people know the questions to ask. Greg, there's this one last question. It's one that I actually deal with quite a lot about employers with folks on OPT traveling internationally. Yeah. I will just give you my shot while I tell employers. One, I would ask this: does your employee need to travel for work? The answer is no, then you tell them not to travel. Period, end of story. Don't travel. If they need to travel for work, obviously you need your OPT documentation, you need your work permit, you need your last 3 weeks, 3 pay stubs, you need a letter from the employer verifying your employment, and you need a rosary, and you need to say a lot of Hail Marys that you don't get stopped coming in.
I would say as an employer, if you have, don't stress. If you have other employees that could do that travel instead, do the employee a favor and don't stress them out to the ends of time by just sending them out because you think it's just routine. Anybody on a non-immigrant visa who's traveling right now is completely stressed out when they are on the CBP line, and some for better reasons than other. But in any case, if it's the employer that's controlling things and the employer has other people that could do the travel instead, at least have that conversation with the employee and let them know that the immigration lawyers are saying travel is not advised, and you found another person that can do it.
I would also strongly recommend that folks download the mobile passport control app from CBP or CBP Link. This actually lets you into the United States much faster if you're traveling internationally. And global entry mobile, all three of those make your process. If you can get global entry, if you're qualified for it, you should get it.
Yeah,
That makes your processing much faster, much easier, much smoother when you come into the United States.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we haven't seen with global entry this time versus 2017, there were a whole big rash of revocations of global
Oh,
entry.
yeah, tons.
And I litigated with Andrew Free. We did a big FOIA suit on that. It seemed like it was a problem that was sort of relatively short-lived, and we never really figured out that we decided that it wasn't something that was being directed from Washington. It was just a lot of rogue CBP officers.
Rogue, because everybody knows what Trump wants, so I'll just do what Trump wants. He doesn't have to tell me.
But we haven't, to their credit this time, CBP, for all the other stuff we're hearing about, hasn't gone down that road.
I haven't seen really any massive change at CBP. I've just seen a lot of publicity about some of the folks. But I've been dealing with airport problems, Greg, for 36 years. People call me all the time from the airport, and my Santissima Tia Maria is being stopped at the airport, and what can you do to help her? And the answer is nothing, because they're not in the United States, and there's nothing I can do to help them.
Right, but one tip we could give to people who have green cards that are coming in and they are being put in secondary and they're getting hassled is that
Do not sign.
you are they'll hoping they'll tire you out or intimidate you and offer you maybe a visitor status in exchange for surrendering your green card. But if you are patient and you are willing to go in front of wait till you get your in front of a judge, maybe in a couple of days,
You will almost always get in. Almost always.
yeah. So be assertive about your rights if you're a green card holder, and they try and make the argument that you've abandoned your status.
Thank you, Nina. It's been a joyful day.
Thank you both so much for taking the time.
Friday afternoon, but
We need the updates. So thank you both for being here, and thank you all for submitting your questions. We really appreciate your participation today. We want to thank you all so much for joining us for another Justia webinar. As I mentioned earlier, don't forget to take advantage of our powerful and free legal resource to keep up with all of the legal updates available for you as a Justia Connect member, our Justia Daily Opinion Summaries. You'll get those next day email alerts with concise summaries of the latest court opinions in the jurisdictions and practice areas of your choosing, whether that's immigration related or not. You can sign up at newsletters.justia.com to stay in the know. Thank you all so much for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.